Okay, so we'll get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Ditzler, the chair of the Transportation Committee for Sierra Club, Maryland. And we've got a full program for you for the next hour. If you could all have your computers or phones on mute, that'd be great. And we can talk about opening them up during the Q&A session. So let me first start sharing the slides. There we go. Okay, so this is a list of the can you all see this, my screen?
Yes.
Great. So this is a list of the organizations that are sponsoring this event tonight. Thank you to all of them. And here's the agenda for the meeting. After my brief introductory remarks, we'll be having remarks by our sponsor of the bill, Delegate Love. I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty advancing the slide. It just jumped back.
That's okay, I can share it.
Okay, why don't we go to the agenda this slide then? Are you able to advance the slides, Lindsay? Because I'm having difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so after remarks from me, the Delegate Love, and then we're going to have the health impacts from Dr. Christine Berg. Kevin from the Kevin will then be giving us some discussion of what's involved with the bill. We're going to have a group panel. We fortunately have 3 different citizens groups represented, and then we do a Q&A. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so why is it crucial to reduce the emissions from the transportation sector? A number of reasons, because transportation, as you all have heard us say, is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the state, and for that matter, in the country. Tailpipe pollution, separate from the greenhouse gas emissions, also increases the risk of heart disease, lung cancer, asthma, other respiratory diseases. Climate, another reason to do it, because we need to reduce greenhouse gases, and truck emissions are a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. And equity, because low income and communities of color have a disproportionate impact from vehicle pollution at present. Next slide. So this is some of the trucks that will be addressed by this legislation. You can see that medium and heavy duty trucks account for just 10% of the vehicles on the road, but 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and 57% of particulate matter 2.5 emissions, and a high amount of NOx emissions. Trucks and buses contribute a disproportionate amount of transportation pollution. Next slide. So Maryland joined with 14 other states last summer to actually sign on to a multi-state zero emission medium and heavy duty memorandum of understanding that would implement strong standards on trucks emissions. Interest so far, 6 states led by California have implemented this. It appears so far that this is another example of a promise from the governor not being fulfilled, because Maryland, while he signed on to the memorandum of understanding, he's not done anything after he got publicity for doing this. So that's why we have this bill to force the state government to implement a Clean Trucks Act. Next slide. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Delegate Sara Love, who's graciously agreed to be the House sponsor of the Clean Trucks Act. She is a lawyer and was elected to the Maryland House of Delegates in 2018, representing District 16. She serves on the House Environment and Transportation Committee and its Motor Vehicle Transportation Subcommittee. She's chair of the Land Use, Transportation, and Public Safety Committee of the Montgomery County Delegation and is a member of the Maryland Legislative Transit Caucus, Women Legislators of Maryland, and the Maryland Legislative Latino Caucus. She's also a member of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments Metropolitan Washington Air Quality Committee and also serves on the Interstate Chesapeake Bay Commission. Over to you, Delegate Love.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for that introduction. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for spending your Monday evening with us. A lot of great information about the bill that you've heard some of it from Brian, and you'll hear more of it. Big shout out to my constituent, Dr. Berg, who you will hear from in a minute. Honored to be the House sponsor. Brian pronounced the COG MWAC, as we call it, very well. It deals, as you heard, with air quality in the Metro DC area. So it dovetails quite nicely with this bill. Happy, like I said, to be the sponsor, happy to answer any questions, but I'm just here to say thank you for all that you do. We in Annapolis can't do our jobs without the advocates, and we need to hear your voices, because that's what moves legislators. So appreciate your time this evening, and I look forward to the rest of the program. Thanks so much. Brian, you're muted.
Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Christine Berg, who's going to be presenting the health rationale for controlling diesel exhaust. Dr. Berg is an oncologist who previously worked at the National Cancer Institute in a Georgetown Lombardi Cancer Center. Her areas of expertise are lung cancer screening and lung cancer risk, particularly in factors other than smoking, such as air pollution. She serves on the Board of Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. Over to you, Chris. And if we could have the slides up again then.
Thank you very much, Brian, for that warm introduction. And I would specifically like to thank Delegate Love for agreeing to be the House sponsor of this legislation. I just wish everyone in Maryland had the wonderful representation we have here in District 16. We have an absolutely marvelous delegation to Annapolis, and we're thrilled to support them and their excellent work. I'm going to speak about the adverse health effects of diesel pollution. Next slide, please. Kevin Shen, who will be speaking about the specifics of the Clean Air Act, did this analysis for the state of Maryland. It's a modeling study that looks both at the number of vehicles and trucks traveling in various areas of the state, major highways, along ports, warehouses, etc. And there are air quality monitoring stations throughout Maryland, dispersed rather widely, but they still are a very useful tracking device. And so this monitors specifically the pollutants from diesel, and shows you that there is variability across the state. Next slide, please. So Brian mentioned the pollutants, and as you can see in the picture here, when diesel trucks first get started, and if they have the standard diesel engines, the way they operate, they emit this very black smoke. Back in the day, the solution to pollution was dilution, and we don't really recommend that anymore. We recommend eliminating the pollution at the source. And particulate matter still emerges. I'll show the size of it in a minute. And it includes the soot, as you can see, ash particulates, abrasive particles, etc. Nitrogen oxides are directly harmful when they're inhaled. They disperse relatively rapidly, but they can react with other compounds to form ozone. And there are other harmful compounds within these emissions. Carbon dioxide is a serious increasing problem. Even after the pandemic shutdown, we've rebounded. Diesel pollution is a serious source of this, and we need to address it. Changes in diesel fuel standards have eliminated the sulfates, fortunately. The clean diesel trucks have helped with particulates and NOx, but there are still harmful levels and CO2 emissions persist. Next slide. The size of these particulates is very, very small. This shows a human hair. The blue circles are particulate matter 10 microns, which are the larger particles, and the smaller particles, 2.5, are a quarter of that size and are readily inhaled. All of this comes from burning fossil fuels and power plants and motor vehicles, and unfortunately, wildfires. Next slide, please. The larger particles are trapped in our mouth and nose. The PM particulate matter 10 gets into the upper airways. And the reason PM 2.5 is so harmful is it is so tiny it gets breathed into our smaller airways, where it creates a lot of inflammation. So you can get impaired respiratory function, cough, bronchitis, and long-term diseases such as heart attacks and stroke. Asthma is a big problem in exposed communities, and asthma attacks can be exacerbated by increases in these pollutions. My interest in lung cancer and bladder cancer is also related to my desire to lower air pollution. Next slide, please. So trucks are a disproportionate source of these particulates. There are both short-term and long-term respiratory effects. They're in Maryland. There's disproportionate higher exposure in Black and brown populations. And also Baltimore City has an exposure higher than the state average, as does PG County. And the exposures, as Kevin showed on the map, are near highways, ports, warehouses, and other areas of heavy truck traffic. Carbon dioxide emissions cause climate change, and that we are experiencing increasing health threats from the climate change itself. And this will compound the effects of the particulates and the nitrous oxides, lead to real problems with flooding, drought, hurricanes, wildfires, and mold, and a number of problems. So we have our work cut out for us. This is just one prong in our approach to helping clean the air. So thank you.
Brian, you're on mute again.
Oh, sorry. So this is a poll to break up our talk a little bit and make it allow you to be more involved. So this is our first poll question. What most concerns you about diesel trucks? And if you could indicate whether it's noise pollution or air pollution, climate pollution, traffic, the accidents, the toxic materials, or something else that you can mention in the chat. If you could fill out the poll, and in a little bit, we'll then show you what the results are. Obviously, click on what you think is important and hit submit. Okay, so understandably, most of you are concerned about air pollution, which is very legitimate with all of the particulate matter that's being released by the diesel pollution. Okay, so now we'll go, thank you, Lindsay. Now over to you, Kevin. We can have the slides up, please.
All right, thanks so much, Brian. Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here to talk about this potentially impactful bill called the Clean Trucks Act of 2022. This implements a regulation called the Advanced Clean Trucks Rule. So if you hear either name, we're referring to the same thing. I am an analyst with the Union of Concerned Scientists, where I work on truck and bus electrification and other air pollution issues. Also, I'm based in Silver Spring, so I'm talking about Maryland, talking about home right now. Could I get the next slide? And so given all the things that are so bad about diesel trucks that we just saw in our poll, including as well the health risks that Chris outlined, as well as the climate impact of these trucks, this rule sets out to increase the adoption of electric trucks with zero tailpipe emissions. These are largely either powered by energy stored in batteries or hydrogen fuel cells. And so the way that this rule works is that it requires manufacturers to sell increasing amounts of electric trucks starting in 2024 through 2035. This applies to vehicles weighing over 8,500 pounds. And so this does not cover, for example, Ford F-150s, pickup trucks that you might have, but rather concerns everything that's heavier than that. So there's the Ford F-250. It also includes delivery vans, cargo vans, tractor trailers, delivering all of our stuff, dump trucks, and many, many other vehicles. Next slide. And so the Advanced Clean Trucks Rule, or the Clean Trucks Act of 2022, increases the electric truck sales targets very, very gradually in a way that's technologically feasible and specific for different segments, as you can see in the chart on the right. And it's important to note that these technologies for this transition are available today. There are over 100 electric trucks from over 30 manufacturers across different truck types. And those are either here already or coming in the next 2 years before this rule goes into effect. And some of these are in Maryland. For example, Volvo has a Mack Trucks engine and transmission plant in Hagerstown. And there's also some other electric trucks menu suppliers near Baltimore. So this regulation wouldn't affect these individual plants, but would act on manufacturers on a whole. So as an example, this regulation would say that all Volvo trucks that are sold in Maryland have to be a certain amount electric or something like that. And they would do that for all manufacturers. Next slide. And so this rule would result in a gradually increasing share of electric trucks on the roads, resulting in at least 175,000 of these cleaner trucks on Maryland roads by 2050. This would avoid over 69,000 short tons of toxic NOx emissions that Chris talked about, over 600 tons of PM2.5, and also over 7.2 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions. Now, these numbers may just be abstract numbers for now, but they translate to over hundreds of millions of dollars in avoided hospital visits and cases, mitigation of climate change, and a bunch of other societal and economic benefits. Could I get that next slide? And so this rule started in California, and through California's Clean Air Act waiver is being adopted across the country. So it's already in 6 states today, as you can see with the blue and the green states on this map. Oregon, Washington, New Jersey, New York, and Massachusetts have all adopted the Advanced Clean Trucks Rule. And this year, we want to see Maryland join that list as well. I'm happy to answer any questions during the Q&A, but for now, I'll pass it to Joanna Wermers from Maryland Sierra Club's Transportation Committee, who will introduce our next group of speakers. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Up next, we have community activists who are going to be discussing their concerns about diesel truck pollution in their areas, which are all surrounded by heavily trafficked highways. Our first speaker is Sara Ben, who will discuss diesel pollution in Southern Harford County and how a warehouse industrialization is destroying our environment and harming a historic Black community.
Hi, my name is Sara Ben, and I'm a statewide advocate. I represent Voices Maryland and the Policy Foundation of Maryland out of Harford County. For years in Harford County, those who were pro-industrializing Perryman Peninsula, which is a small area in Harford County, Southern Harford County, and Aberdeen, have been trying to gain a second access point to the Perryman Peninsula industrial area. By gaining this second access point in 2019 into the historical Black community that is now becoming more diverse, yet more and more industrialized, it has now laid open a developer's free-for-all. Developers, primarily from out of state, as usual, proposed a 5-warehouse project on Perryman Peninsula on December 1st, 2021. Over 300 of its residents, angry and tired of it all, showed up at the Richland Ballroom in Edgewood, Maryland, to say no more. 24 hours a day, 18-wheelers powered by diesel, spewing massive air pollution into Perryman Peninsula, enter into Spasucia Road, spreading these toxins everywhere, then exiting. These diesel-powered trucks carrying Clorox and other hazardous items right in the middle of this blue-collar, low to middle income historical community, whether it's 6 a.m., 9 a.m., 12 p.m., 3 p.m., 5 p.m., truck congestion is high. And if diesel-powered trucks break down on this small 2-lane road, it creates unsafe traffic and roadway congestion to a point that pedestrians and homeowners cannot even commute in and out of their own home roadways. There are large backups from multi-semi tractor trailers arriving and warehouse shift changes, which seem to be continuously going on day and night. This increased traffic makes trips in and out of the 5 surrounding communities unsafe and filled with diesel pollution. All these big rig diesel trucks near water carrying hazardous items, some known and some unknown, have potential for environmental impacts that will destroy the water sources, wildlife, land, and other uses. The excessive diesel pollution clearly has impacted the health of the community, and the community has paid a devastating price for the toxic air they have had to breathe. There is a high incidence of people getting cancer in the Perryman Peninsula community on several streets that the diesel-powered tractor trailers run on day and night. Environmental asthma and other breathing issues have plagued this area as more and more diesel-powered trucks motor down the streets of Perryman Peninsula. It's becoming its own Silkwood circumstance, and it's as if no one knows what's going on, yet everyone knows something is going on, and there has been a breach in the environment, and it's just being hidden from the greater public, like most things in Hartford. The traffic is so horrible in the Perryman Peninsula in the early morning, the late afternoon, particularly because the workers going to work and the community coming home from work, that the meeting of the two worlds is a daily unsafe collision and an excessive air pollution with the addition of these diesel-powered trucks clogging up the area, loading and unloading. The reality of the routing trucks onto the peninsula creates a safety problem. Ambulance, rescue issues, potentials for spills, traffic pileups, and accident closures on a day-to-day basis. And just to think, the Chesapeake Bay is sitting right next to the Perryman Peninsula. The Chesapeake Bay cannot be sustained with this continued diesel-powered air pollution and how it ruins the local waterways and tributaries with these warehouse projects directly next to these sensitive areas, some top secret and some not, creating millions of square feet of parking lots and buildings and dumping into sediment ponds, which are all too near Bush River and undisturbed forest. Community needs no more diesel trucks in Perryman Peninsula. They are already suffering health-wise from the impacts of the diesel pollution of these trucks, imagine more. The best thing we can do is continue to advocate for no more diesel trucks in Perryman Peninsula. No more. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Sara, for educating us about diesel pollution in Southern Hartford County. Our second speaker is Kamita Gray, president of Brandywine TB Southern Region Neighborhood Coalition.
Good afternoon. I'm Kamita Gray. I'm a long-term 50-plus year resident of Brandywine. I'm the president of the Brandywine TV Southern Region Neighborhood Coalition. We've been in existence since 1962. Brandywine, of approximately 10,000 residents, is in a heavy industrial zone. We have 15 heavy industrial sites throughout along major roadways and highways and face disproportionate burdens from traffic and transportation pollution. Our environmental pollution hazard map can be viewed on our website. Tailpipe pollution is one of our major concerns, and due to the Brandywine Road Club, which has deferred roadway improvements for over 21 years, Brandywine is subject to over 90,000 daily one-way vehicle trips. They will grow with the new developments in the works, meaning Brandywine has estimated increase of daily commercial car generated trips of 420,000 plus. Being Brandywine has around 35 to 5,000 heavy diesel trucks daily due to the deliveries of surface mining and the fly ash facility. Not to mention the 218-wheeler tractor trailers that idle on a daily basis due to the UPS facility that's now in operation. All of these heavy industrial sites sit next to residential housing. Brandywine is a 2.9-mile radius. Whether you're down the street, across the street, the concentration of toxic air pollution is high. Therefore, Brandywine should be highly concerned with air quality. Depending on the last study, 70 to 90 percentile for cancer and asthma. The Clean Trucks Act of 2022 require the Maryland Department of Environment to adopt the Advanced Clean Truck Rule by the end of 2022. That would highly benefit the Brandywine area. Zero emissions vehicles have no tailpipe emissions. When compared to diesel vehicles, they are 2 to 5 times more efficient, reduce dependence on petroleum, and reduce greenhouse gases emissions substantially. Due to the 35% increase in asthma and the high concentration of cancer, we will continue to advocate for the Brandywine community and diesel trucks reduction. Thank you, and thanks for listening.
Thanks, Kamita, for letting us know about diesel pollution in Brandywine. Our third speaker.
Sorry, there's one video I think Kamita wanted to share before we move on to the next speaker.
Oh, okay.
Kamita, I don't know if you wanted to give additional context on this.
This is the new UPS facility for package deliveries and pickup and distribution. There are average of 200 trucks daily. They are averaging 4 hours of sitting there waiting to be loaded and unloaded. And we're talking about 18-wheelers, which is the worst PM2 and pollution that is devastating to the lungs. And Brandywine was already in the 70s plus percentile. So we haven't even calculated how much more this will add to the concentration of the air pollution within Brandywine, especially when we're talking about black soot and those things that are coming from these trucks that are idling for those times that they're sitting there.
Oh,
Are you finished, Kamita?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kamita. Our third speaker is Karen Moe, who is retired from NASA Goddard, where she worked in the Earth Science Technology Office. She volunteers on Chevrolet's Green Infrastructure Committee based on her interest in citizen science and helping people make effective use of air quality information.
Hey, thank you for inviting me to talk today. I wonder if we could bring up the map that shows the situation for Chevrolet. I think the Brandywine situation is similar, only bigger in terms of size and impact. Cheverly is located inside the Beltway, just the Cheverly Metro stop, if you're familiar with the Washington area, is right there and depicted on this map. The green area shows our town, which is about 1.6 square miles. And the gray areas around this map are heavy industry. And I'll point out also that the brown and orange areas are heavy industry. But I'll be focusing on the orange areas. Those are two new developments that we learned about in 2020. One is an Amazon distribution facility that will have 400 trucks coming in and making their deliveries daily. These are those smaller trucks. I don't know how many, don't remember how many of the large 18-wheelers come in to load up the warehouse, but I believe that will start operations later this year. The smaller orange area is the District of Columbia has purchased this land to develop their circulator bus maintenance depot and also their commercial driver's license for trucks. They had wanted to open that truck licensing facility for testing this year, but I'll get into that in a moment. I also wanted to indicate that Route 50 is this major street going through our town to the south. I saw on Kevin's map that he indicated the volume of truck traffic and its impact on pollution there. And so we see a lot of truck traffic coming through our area. And to the on the west side, we have 295, which becomes the BW Parkway, and the trucks kind of veer off and go off on Kenilworth Avenue, which is also surrounding us. The other thing is in the industrial area, Sheriff Road and there's a Kevin Branch are kind of major areas where trucks come in and idle while they are waiting to be loaded or unloaded. And it turns out that the Maryland Department of Environment is very familiar with these areas because there's been a high number of complaints due to especially idling trucks. So with all of this going on, Cheverly decided to partner with the University of Maryland and implement a Purple Air network, a hyper-local network, a concentration of these small purple air sensors that detect particulate matter, PM 2.5, that Chris was talking about, as well as PM 1.0 and a few other measures that contribute to the pollution calculation. And you can go to purpleair.com and look at their map and just check out Cheverly, Maryland to see our real-time data that's coming from these sensors. We have over 25 of them installed through town. People have volunteered to host them on their outside of their houses with electricity and Wi-Fi access. And we've situated them in areas that are near schools. The orange dots there represent some of the schools or churches. And we are really interested in working with the University of Maryland to better understand the way that the public can make use of this data. But in the meantime, we established our network in April of 2021. And that summer, Maryland Department of Environment initiated what they're calling the Cheverly Targeted Inspection Initiative. And over the summer, they invited Cheverly residents to submit events, especially idling trucks. And they were also monitoring our network for spikes in PM output, and conducted a number of inspections. They also notified the industries that this would be going on. So based on these interactions that we've had, the DC Department of Environment has been working with the Maryland Department of Environment, and there is a very strong interest in reducing diesel pollution. And they have delayed their plans so that they can do more analysis of the cumulative impacts of their planned circulator bus that they want to put the maintenance depot in our area. That would be 120 buses. And of that set, they intend to make them electric buses by, I believe, 2035. And we've been lobbying with them to encourage them to make that change to electric before they develop their depot. Current plans were to put in a 10,000 gallon tank of diesel fuel, and then they would have the whole process of removing it later on. And of course, that introduces all kinds of pollution concerns that we have. So that's my story for Chevrolet, and thank you for letting me share it today.
Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your story.
So thank you to Sara, Kamita, and Karen for that. And now we're going to do our second poll question. Lindsay, if you could put up the second poll. And after that, we'll have our Q&A session. Second poll has to do with environmental justice. You can read it as well as I can. You have 4 options there. Please fill them out and we'll give the results very soon. Okay, Lindsay, I think people have probably all voted by now.
Great. And also you might need to maximize the poll screen just if you want to see it a little bit better, because some of it is cut off. And I will share the results.
So as you can see, clean trucks impact are an environmental justice issue for a number of reasons, all of the above. Okay, so now we'll go to the Q&A session. I saw some of you have been doing Qs back and forth with Chris already, but we'll be able to take more questions now. Let me just address the first question that we've gotten several times, and then I'll turn it over to Lindsay to handle this. A number of people have asked us, can diesel trucks now just switch out their engine to put in a so-called clean truck? It's going to be a non-diesel engine. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Kevin, but the answer is no. The engine cannot be. I think you have to go a totally new truck unless you want to take the total engine replacement. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yeah, the electric trucks usually have their batteries on the bottom and the engines in a different part. Like, I'm sure some companies are looking at retrofitting diesel trucks for electric, but for the large part, these are new trucks that we're talking about.
Okay, so over to you, Lindsay, to handle the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take questions through the chat. And then after that, I can give you instructions for if you want to ask a question or a comment verbally. So apologies if you already wrote the question, but just so I can follow along, if your question wasn't answered earlier by Dr. Berg, if you can put that question in the chat right now, we can try to get to that. And it's also helpful if you want to direct it to a specific speaker as well. So I'll give folks a couple moments to do that. I see a question from one individual. Is it possible to convert all these vehicles to electric, or is alternate fuels also needed? Does anyone want to take that?
Kevin, if you want to, that would be my preference, but otherwise I'll answer it.
Yeah, I would go down and say that there are many different technologies and across a bunch of different use cases, even like the most difficult to electrify use cases, which is long haul trucking, that's like starting to be more developed now. So I would say that like it is possible and it's also necessary to convert all of these vehicles to electric. We don't need to be emitting more greenhouse gas emissions and PM and NOx than we need to be doing. Feel free to add.
The other point is the infrastructure for charging is already being built up. There are issues specific to the needs of truckers, obviously, but other alternative fuels don't have as much infrastructure in the works, and that would be a limiting factor. And I think personally, the switch to electric, as Kevin does, makes sort of the most sense in terms of the way we are going.
Thank you. The next question is from Amy Marin. To what extent are trash trucks contributing to the air quality greenhouse gas problems? And are there any innovations in that industry? I can just add anecdotally that I live in Hyattsville, Maryland, and I know it's the place of one of the first garbage trucks to be electric. So there is a solution in that regard to that class of vehicle being technologically available. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that.
Kevin, are they included in the medium trucks?
Yeah, exactly like Lindsay was saying. That's part of it all. And so trash trucks as well contribute to all of the pollution that we're talking about.
The next question is from Rich. For the proposed bill, does it require trucks that are sold in Maryland, or does it require trucks operated in Maryland to be clean? If just sold, companies will just buy their trucks out of state. Kevin, do you want to answer this?
You can, if you have a thought, Lindsay, but I can.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so the answer to that, Rich, is that any truck that's sold in Maryland, regardless of what manufacturing company it's made from, has to be, depending on class side, has to be zero emission of that certain percentage that ramps up. So it is any major company like Volvo, Mac, et cetera, if they're selling in Maryland, those sales have to be zero emission.
But the issue of purchasing trucks out of state is to some extent being addressed with the 14 states along the eastern seaboard that are also have signed the memorandum of understanding. New Jersey, for example, has passed their legislation and implemented the bill. And so there's a movement regionally and also in Colorado and the West Coast. Clearly, it would be nice if we had more federal standards, and that would be helpful as well. But we feel that every state that adds to this helps.
Thank you. And another question from Norman. Is there a Senate sponsor for the bill, and what does the House and Senate leadership feel about it? So I can answer that for the Senate sponsor. We don't currently have a Senate sponsor, but we plan to secure one soon. And I think really the more that you can be reaching out to the Senate leadership and telling them how important this bill is, I think that's a great way to make sure that it moves to the finish line. We have another question from Tara Lynn. If these trucks are changed to electric, how will that affect the tax dollars, and will consumers have to increase the cost for delivery? And are there incentives for companies to switch to electric trucks? Does anyone want to take that?
I'll take that. Businesses will always say, that improving their operations and causing them to spend money will make it more expensive for the consumer. But if you think about the costs of the health impacts of the pollution on our bodies and the greenhouse gas emissions that are affecting climate, and you factor those costs in, it's far less expensive overall to require vehicles to be electric as opposed to staying diesel. And let me just, as a corollary to that, the more that companies can use trains to ship product as opposed to trucks, the better that is for the environment. We're not having that as a push as a part of this legislation, but that's clearly a truth that exists, and we would when given the opportunity, say yes. The more that we can get freight on trains, the better, and the more that we can get the trains to be electric versus diesel, we're even better off as an alternative to trucking.
If I could add to that as well, I definitely want to echo a point that I think Patricia is also making in the chat, which is that electric trucks are also, like, fleets themselves want electric trucks because it also benefits their bottom line. So like within the next 5 to 10 years, the total cost of ownership of an electric truck will be cheaper than a gas powered or a diesel powered vehicle. And so this is not like, the climate and health benefits are good enough alone, but also this makes economic sense for fleets themselves.
Thanks, Kevin. And our next question is from Leslie. Any lessons from other states who have passed the Advanced Clean Truck Rule or related bills that we can use for our advocacy on this bill?
Leslie, thank you for the question. I can say that in New Jersey, I worked with a group of physicians to help lobby for the legislation. And so we're investigating the health angle. Also, Lindsay and I are going to be working with communication specialists that have worked successfully in California. We're meeting with them next week to discuss strategies.
Thanks, Dr. Berg. So finally, I just wanted to address John's question. We don't yet have a bill number, but we're expecting that soon, and we'll be sure to email everyone who registered for the event when we have that bill number, and of course the developments that happen, so you can continue staying engaged on that. It also looks like Larissa added in the chat that companies like IKEA and Etsy also express support for the Advanced Clean Truck Rule in New Jersey, and business support is available and important. So thank you for adding that, Larissa. Before we move on, I just wanted to also see if anyone wanted to ask a question or make a comment verbally. If so, if you can just put your name in the chat, I can be sure to unmute you. And yes, and this is going to be part of the overall climate package that Sierra Club and many other groups are supporting, just to answer that question. And I see Lee, you have your hand raised. You want to unmute?
Yeah, just wondered if we have an idea of which committees this will likely go to, like economic matters or ENT or what, or more than one.
You're referring to the committees?
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we, since we don't have a bill number, I don't think it's assigned, but I do believe it's likely that it could go to Environment and Transportation in the House, and potentially the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee in the Senate, just based on similar bills that have gone to those committees. All right, well, if no one else has a question or comment, I'm going to move on to our last part of the program, which is just additional ways that y'all can take action. There's going to be a lot of opportunities to make sure this bill gets to the finish line. And so really excited that y'all are here and engaged. Just to share the timeline of what it looks like for the bill to move forward and how the regulation gets adopted. We expect, thanks to all of your support, hopefully, that the Advanced Clean Truck Rule, the Clean Trucks Act of 2022 will pass in April. And after that, it would mean that the Maryland Department of Environment would start their regulatory process. There would be, the regulation would go through the Air Quality Advisory Commission. There would potentially be a hearing on that. For their recommendation. There would be public hearings expected on the regulation in the summer or fall if it moves through. And then the legislation does note that it would need to be adopted by the end of the calendar year. So hopefully by December 31st of 2022, we'll have Maryland added to the many states that have already adopted the Advanced Clean Truck Rule. And there's lots of different ways that you can take action throughout this process. Just to name some dates and times, there's going to be a first day of session virtual action on Wednesday. Apologies, it's at 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. And that is a time where you can, we'll have a social media blitz and a call-in, collective call-in. So we'll be collectively calling our legislators, tagging folks on social media, letting them know how this bill is important, in addition to many of the other bills in the climate platform that this is a part of as comprehensive climate legislation. There's different lobby nights that are coming up, and this bill will be featured as one of those bills. So Sierra Club's having their lobby night on February 3rd and 7th. CCAN is having theirs on February 17th and 21st. If you are planning on having a lobby night, feel free to share that in the chat if you're planning on highlighting this bill as a part of that. Finally, there'll be written and verbal testimony. So you'll have the opportunity to either send in written testimony on this bill or testify either in person, potentially in the Senate, if it's after Valentine's Day, or in the House. It looks like the hearings are going to be virtual, at least for the time being. So there's also many other ways to take action by calling, your elected officials on social media, amplifying, writing letters to the editor, writing op-eds, many, many ways to really spotlight this, or holding another event like this. So I'm going to share in the chat. There's two things. First is, if you want to fill out a volunteer form, if you're interested in doing any of the things that I mentioned, we'd love to have your involvement. So I'm going to share a volunteer form, and we're also going to share the recording and the slides, as well as the link that I just shared. So I would love your support. And the second thing is, we have a fact sheet as well. So this is a great material to use to share with folks so they can learn more about the bill. And I'm also going to share that in the chat as well. So with that, I think I wanted to thank all of our speakers so much for your time. I wanted to also thank our captioner, Caitlin with Maryland Relay, for providing captioning for this event, and see if any of our other speakers had any other last remarks they wanted to give. And I will update the form, the volunteer form. Thanks, Leslie.
Virtual Action Day, Lindsay, how do people get to that?
Yeah, I'm going to share in the chat. There's a sign-up form that you can use for, and you'll get the Zoom link for that. So I'm going to put that in the chat.
I would just like to thank Lindsay Mendelson for her excellent leadership of the Sierra Club Transportation. group. She has done excellent work over the last several years lobbying on behalf of all of us. And I'd also like to thank Brian Ditzler for chairing our meeting today. And he's the volunteer who chairs the Transportation Committee for the Sierra Club. And I'd like to thank Kevin Shen of the Union of Concerned Scientists and Johanna for her work with the Sierra Club, and specifically thank our community speakers for their excellent work. And we owe it to their communities and all communities in Maryland to clean our air and make it better. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, Dr. Berg. Thanks, everyone.